Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. A bonus video this week as it is pre-order weekend for the Space Marine Codex, and lots of information has been coming out over the last couple of days about what we can expect to see in the book when it comes out. This is coming through the larger content creators here on YouTube and other forums where they are fortunate enough to get advanced copies of the book, so we'll be able to tell us more about what's going on. However, I thought it'd be interesting to provide a bit more of an everyman view, so this is really coming from the thoughts of someone who hasn't had the privilege of seeing those books early and is really forming some initial reactions based on the information that's being fed to us by these reviews. In the interest of fairness, I will say right at the start of the book, at the start of this, I have ordered a copy of the book, so I'm looking forward to receiving that and seeing what I can do with it. But I thought, as I say, chart my journey around my thinking around the Space Marine Codex. So where was I before the pre-order weekend? Well, leading up to the weekend, I have to say I was struggling to get excited for Space Marines. Lots of my favourite units had gone to Legends, the 9th edition army and an early 10th edition army that I was running for Space Marines. There's a lot of attack bikes, use of scouts, things like that. Actually, I really quite fancy getting hold of a land speeder as well, but I avoided making those purchases as soon as I realised that I wouldn't be able to use them after about a month's time. So the loss of those sort of models which have been quite important to my armies and just aspects of the army I quite liked, them disappearing was somewhat problematic for my excitement, shall we say. Another issue I'd found really with certainly 10th edition is the models that I have for Space Marines. Whilst I have some of the things that are currently meta or currently working, a lot of the stuff that you need to really to win games at any sort of level, I just don't have. Now I've got quite a few Space Marines, mostly because every time there's a starter box you get some more Space Marines, but my collection isn't the right collection if I want to be competitive on the field. Now, as much as it doesn't matter to be competitive all the time, there is the bit of a strain, particularly if you don't get to play that often, if you're on a long line of big crushing defeats. It's not something that has particularly feel-good moments for making the best of your rare hobby time. And the final thing to point out really around why I wasn't that excited leading into pre-order, actually I was quite nervous of the cost of making my army effective. Now, I wasn't ever going to be setting out to create an army that is absolutely world-beating purely on the meta, but the cost of bringing in just a few units actually starting to look really, really expensive, and the stuff I like and perhaps people are tempted to get hold of isn't necessarily always usable in any realistic context. So I was feeling a little bit down about this and wondering whether it was worth me getting the Space Marine Codex at all. At this point in time, I think it's probably worth a little bit of a segue just to talk around my background in Space Marines. They were my second main army, I think, for Warhammer 40,000. When I started playing at the end of 4th, 5th edition, it was very much all about the orcs. Some years later, I picked up Space Marines, in part because no one else at the club I was at the time played Space Marines, so it meant I had something on the table that other people weren't using. But I was also really trying to form a narrative around my army, the Order of the Sacred Book. And if people are interested in that, I can talk at greater length in a separate video. Do let me know in the comments down below if that is something you would like to see. But long story short, we've basically got a bit more of a narrative themed army. Definitely got its roots in the old Firstborn models. So yeah, a lot of change would be needed. That brings us on to my current thoughts, and I've almost certainly given the game away a little bit here when I've said I've already ordered the book. in that actually I have changed my viewpoint a little bit on the whole Space Marine situation. And that's not just because I've got a collection of models that I'd actually quite like to use beyond just having the old index cards. So the question is, why? Well, firstly, it looks like the new Space Marine Codex is going to be quite a versatile document. There's going to be a lot of ways of playing the Space Marines, and actually having quite a lot of different disparate things in my collection means I'll be able to lean in different directions fairly easily using the different detachment rules. And that's something that seems quite good. Actually, from what I understand as well, the Tyranid book also has very different ways of being played, so I think overall, as a direction of travel, this sounds like a positive overall, not just something for Space Marines. Within this, I think I'm particularly interested in the Salamander style detachment. So my Space Marines I've always used as a Salamander successor chapter when we had those sort of rules floating around, mainly because the penchant for equipping my guys with flamethrowers and melter weapons, that just fire has always just seemed cool when it comes to these things. So it's nice to see a detachment which will play into this quite nicely. It has been labelled as one of the perhaps potentially more effective detachments, which kind of feels like I might be leaping a bit harder into the meta than I would like if I go down that direction. But if it lets me put flamethrowers on and use the Infernus Marines, then great. Having said these things, I am still concerned around some of the prices that we're looking at. So it looks like that the aggressor block, for example, is going to remain a thing. It is a thing now, but it looks like it's still going to be a thing in the new codex. 6 aggressors, probably with a Gravis Captain. Now, to buy that unit from Games Workshop or at recommended retail price, you're looking at the thick end of £100. And that is an awful lot of money for just one unit. As an aside, I have been looking separately at doing maybe an Infantry Imperial Guard army using figures from Wargames Atlantic and pricing that up, not at RRP because you can get some better prices, but including discounts from things like Wayland Games, Element Games, or Wargames Atlantic themselves. I could pick up an army at 2,000 points for just under £300, which makes one unit at £100 seem particularly pricey, albeit I appreciate there is that effectiveness that you're potentially paying for. I mean, that means, I think, to me, that it might rule out buying models, certainly RRP, but it might mean ruling out the Games Workshop models and looking for some 3D print alternatives. I'm going to draw a line in the sand here and say I'm not looking at recasts or people deliberately infringing the copyright by basically doing exactly the same models, but I don't play in the Games Workshop. I don't have any intentions of playing in Games Workshop sanctioned tournaments, so I can use models from other ranges or 3D prints or other creations to represent those models, and it might be a direction I just have to go down to keep things affordable. More by accident than design, Space Marines did become my go-to army for 9th edition, and as much as I've struggled to get into them for 10th edition, it looks like the doors are opening a little bit with that flexibility to try and do some different things with them and maybe get a little bit more fun and enjoyment out of using the models. And enjoying the models on the tabletop, being able to have some good games with them is something I'm definitely all about. And I'm looking forward to getting that bit of experimentation in the early days of the Codex while things settle down. So, overall, those are my thoughts around the pre-order of the Space Marine Codex. I'm drifting more into the camp of wanting to be there and try them out than I was previously, but of course remains to be seen as I've not had actual physical sight of the book yet. All it remains to say is thank you very much for listening to me drone on from, as I say, a bit of an everyman's position, I think, when it comes to the new codex, someone who's not fully sighted on everything that's going on because I've not had the benefit of having the book in my hand. I am Return to the Old World. If you've enjoyed this video and others like it, do consider dropping a subscribe or a like. It's the best way to help the channel. Once again, thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.